it's awesome.
Second, you hit it. Definitely. Did you give it? Oh, you stared at it. Sometimes it works. It worked with me and my father. Just saying.
There you go. Facebook.
My cousin sent me a meme that said, "You think you can intimidate me? I had to hold a flashlight for my father." It's true for my father.
It's working now.
All right.
Excellent.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Steve.
We'll talk about it later.
Steve, good.
Okay, so these, you press to talk, those are on.
Okay.
So,
All right, so you're on. Okay. Don't talk about anybody.
Try not to. Thank you, Steve.
all right, call me if you
Thank
need.
you, John.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to call the planning board to order. My apologies to those of you who have been waiting. We were having some video difficulties. It seems the planning board software doesn't jive with the recording software, so, but we're ready to go now. So, I hereby announce that pursuant to Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-10, that adequate notice and electronic notice of this meeting has been transmitted on January 23rd, 2021, and again on October 1st, 2021, by the Secretary to the Asbury Park Press, the Independent, the Two River Times, the Township Clerk, and has been posted on the bulletin board on the main access door to Township Hall, and also posted on the Township's website. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then please remain standing for a moment of silence to honor the military who have been wounded or killed in action, and our police officers and public safety personnel that keep us safe every day. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Roll call.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Ackerson?
Here.
Mayor Bontempo?
Here.
Mr. Musso?
Here.
Mr. Forster? Dr. Gilstein?
Here.
Mr. Castanen?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Ms. Bouzas?
Here.
Mr. Santana? Mr. Emma?
Here.
Mr. Dale?
Can we seat Mr. Emma for Committeeman Santana? You're going to get the Alternate of the Year award.
Yeah.
I don't think you've missed a meeting yet.
Ever.
And it's intact.
Thank you. It's always being seated for somebody, but thank you. You play a very important role. We're going to have the continued public hearing now of the Subash Warrior application. It's a preliminary final major subdivision number 661 for block 29, lot 39:832 Holmdel Road. It's in the R40B residential zone. It's a proposed subdivision of 5.13 acres into 2 lots. The property currently contains an existing dwelling and is located in the R40B zone with frontage along Holmdel Road. We have Mr. Stibe for the applicant, and
Good evening,
this is,
Chairperson
like I
Tomaso.
said, a continued public hearing, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. My name is Michael Stibe. I'm an attorney with offices at 16 Cherry Tree Farm Road in Middletown Township, and I have the pleasure of representing the applicants this evening. This is a continuation hearing. We were here on September 7th and presented pretty much our full case to the point that we had witnesses and available exhibits to present to you at that time. So that at that time we presented Mr. Trinidad, who is a surveyor who gave you a review of the layout and design of the subdivision, the layout of the property, the topography and that sort of thing. And we also had engineer Jacqueline Floor, who answered some engineering issues or questions that you had at that time. And then we had principal testimony of planner Andrew Janu, who gave you the planning testimony with regard to variances. At the conclusion of the hearing, the board had, and I'll try and characterize it in my way, 2 principal concerns that they wanted to have cleared up before they felt comfortable to vote on the application. The first of those was with respect to the access to the rear lot on this property for firefighting and emergency access. And since the last meeting, we have received the report from your fire official, who has indicated that he would want to see a driveway of 20 foot in width in order to have adequate access. We have submitted revised plans to the board prior to this meeting, 10 days prior to this meeting, revised through September 21 of this year, which have now provided for a 20-foot wide access throughout the property in order to address the fire official's comments. The other question related to the revelation that we all had from the Environmental Commission that noted that the stream that goes across the very front corner of our property is a Category 1 stream requiring a 300-foot buffer, riparian buffer. Our applicant had gone through the wetland letter of interpretation process. In fact, I provided a copy of the LOI to the board earlier. It was issued last year. And throughout that process, they were never aware that were never made aware by DEP that there was a potential riparian buffer issue. They got their letter of interpretation. They applied for their permits. The permits were issued. The town didn't recognize that issue either. So we do have a riparian buffer. That buffer goes through the front lot of this property, 39.01. It does not reach the rear lot. It has no impact upon the rear lot whatsoever. That riparian buffer line is shown on the revised plans that we have submitted to you. So you can see that they do not touch the rear lot and have no impacts upon that. With respect to the front lot, we do have a garage that has permits and is currently under construction. That garage is going to require us to apply for what they call a permit by rule. And Ms. Floor is here, and if the board has questions about what that is, essentially if you meet certain criteria, it's my understanding as a lawyer, not as an engineer, but it's my understanding that if you meet certain criteria that I believe we do, then you're entitled to a permit by rule and don't have to go through a more formal process of applying for relief from DEP. And Ms. Floor can address that if the board has questions about it. So that's the status of our application at this point. We have submitted a revised plan. It does now show the riparian buffer. It now does show the 20-foot wide drive throughout the site. And at this point, if the board has questions, and I didn't ask Mr. Janu to come back because the issues that were raised were not planning issues. They were more engineering and environmental issues. So he was very happy to take another assignment somewhere else tonight and couldn't be here. But I do have Ms. Floor with me, and I do have our surveyor as well. And if the board has questions, we would be happy to entertain them. I think that our engineer had some discussions with your engineering firm as well to go through the environmental issues and requirements earlier today. And she can report to you on that if you like.
Well, first, I'm remiss for not introducing
Gotcha.
Mr. Mealy. He is sitting in for Bob tonight, and so we will need to swear you in just for the remainder of this application, please, Mr. Mealy.
You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay.
Just for the record, our planner's been sworn in last time, and Mr. Stives' professionals were sworn in last time. They do not need to be sworn.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the plans in front of us. I see that you took out the circular drive and you just made it a straight up driveway, right? The last one, it went like a U, right? I think that's probably better. It looks like you have a turnaround.
Yes, I believe that Mr. Trinidad went through that and that worked better for the larger vehicles to move in and be able
Then to turn around. Yeah.
turn around.
Okay, I don't disagree. So I think it's certainly makes it easier, for one who drives the ambulance to get in and out of the, are these steps in the front of the house?
A couple steps, yes.
Could
Why don't we
you,
come up-
Ron, why don't you come up
to
so you're close to the microphone, please, so they can pick you up.
Yeah.
Now, what you're placing on the easel now, is that the revised plan?
Yes, it is.
And that was revised as of September 21, 2021?
That's correct.
okay, and we'll need to mark it, please, Bonnie? What number are we up to, do we know?
So we have one. Mike, I think we just did one last time, is that what you had? Or Bonnie? To be safe, why don't we just mark it as A5?
I have Mr. Janu's exhibit was A2.
Okay.
So A3.
A3.
Thank you.
And Ron, why don't you just briefly go up to the board after the exhibit marker's been placed on it and show the board, describe the revised driveway configuration and where the riparian buffer line is.
Okay, so basically the only revisions to the subdivision plan was to extend the 20-foot, which you can see, and was just stated as well. And then there's a sufficient radius, 39-foot center line radius to turn a large truck around in the back. Same here, you could, the T turnaround is sufficient center line radius. And then
Ron, I'm sorry, excuse me. Could you maybe hold the microphone, because I'm afraid that it's not picking up. I'm not getting texted that it is, and then
Okay.
again, I don't know where my phone is.
All right, so basically the only changes were the driveway width, and I tried to keep the radiuses, the driveway exceeds the 20-foot width going up to the house, so the center line radius is sufficient to turn around a large truck.
And as far as the riparian buffer, you've now shown that, have you not?
Yes, the buffer by definition is from the bank of the stream, which would be 300 feet from the edge of the small stream that holds the water.
And that buffer doesn't encroach on the rear lot?
No, it does not.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do. I think there was some discussion about easement area 2, of why that shouldn't be extended back to the property line. And I believe we thought we should have that, yet it isn't depicted on this plan.
I'm sorry, that's at the top of the hill?
Yes.
This should be also included into the easement.
But it doesn't show that. But currently, the plan does not show that.
You don't have any problem changing it to include?
No. And I forgot to make that correction on the plan. We can certainly include that into the conservation easement.
And we also made a comment about, and the HEC also made a comment about the fact that with the excessive length of the driveway now even wider, that there might be some stormwater issues, and I don't believe those have been addressed currently. Perhaps you'd like to talk about that.
That is not my expertise as far as a stormwater management. That's an engineering issue. But we did discuss, areas to retain the water and divert the water and, dry wells or whatever would be necessary.
It's my understanding that because of the disturbance level, it will constitute a major development, and we will have to submit a stormwater plan that will address the required quality and quantity requirements for the new stormwater rules. And we're prepared to do that.
So the stormwater management plan has not been addressed for this meeting, or it has been addressed?
It hasn't been designed at this point because we don't know what the rear house is, what the perimeter is going to be. That'll have to be designed when we have that house. We can certainly design it for the front property at this point. And that would be required to be a condition of approval, and it would have to be approved by your local engineering as complying with the stormwater management regulations before we could get any permits.
If I may, Madam Chair. I had some discussions earlier this afternoon with Ms. Fleur, Jackie. We were discussing not only the required permits for this application and some of the parameters that need to be met in order to qualify for the general permit, or the permit by rule, rather. And during those discussions, we also talked about the amount of impervious coverage that's being proposed and disturbance, and whether it would quantify to meet the definition of major development, and there's a strong possibility that it may not exceed the minimum where it would then trigger, by definition, a major development, at less than a quarter acre of impervious, less than an acre of disturbance. So if that's the case, then it would not necessarily need to be designed where you're addressing the quality and quantity parameters of 7:8 of the NJAC. However, in order to address nuisance flooding and just runoff in general, something needs to be incorporated that would appease and obviously have no negative downstream impact. And so that's on you as the applicant and the applicant's team to demonstrate that it doesn't meet the needs as a major development, a major site plan development, and that 7:8 is not applicable, but something is being made to accommodate that additional runoff.
And we have been considering pervious, the pervious concrete, not concrete, but pervious asphalt surfaces, as well as some detention facilities.
That's right.
Mr. Mealy, I have a question for you, though. Do the stormwater rules address whether it's a Category 1 stream or not, and how does that affect whatever stormwater mitigations are required?
The issue with the C1 waters and the stream and the 300-foot buffer is a separate issue that I'm sure Jackie Floor will be providing some testimony on, and the parameters that need to be met there in order to obtain a permit by rule. Those criteria, those details are ones that she's going to need to, in her office, and the applicant's professionals will need to provide to the DEP, and then provide us some documentation that they've had some dialogue and met that criteria. As of now, based on the information provided in the dialogue that we had today and some of our correspondence this afternoon, it seems that they might be able to meet that criteria to get a permit by rule and not trigger the major development criteria. But the burden's on them to prove it.
And that would also be a condition of our approval, correct?
Yes.
So, again, just given the fact that this is a C1 stream, I would like to have the applicant consider over-design of the stormwater, whether it meets the major subdivision requirement.
We're prepared to meet what requirements your engineer places upon us, regardless of whether we're major or not major. If additional stormwater management requirements are necessary to satisfy our engineers, we're prepared to have that as a condition of approval.
Okay.
If I may interject one last time.
Sure.
Obviously, board members and Madam Chair, I would be holding them to the letter of the law per the ordinance. So if you were to require any additional requirements above and beyond that, that would be something you would want to itemize in your condition of approval, should you decide to vote in that way.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to include, is it red there?
It's not.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's still on question.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just trying to figure that out. I just have a quick question for this witness before we move on to the engineer. So, in the opening statement, you indicated that the garage addition will need a certain type of permit from NJDEP, but the driveway will as well, correct? Because that's located within the stream buffer, a significant portion of that. So that, okay, and that, and most
You're
of that,
correct.
okay. So the driveway, because there's sort of a the driveway that's there now it's not as wide. I know it's in pretty bad shape. So just the existing condition it would require additional permitting.
That's correct. That's my understanding, anyway.
I can answer those questions.
Okay. I guess my question for this witness was just to make sure that the driveway was in the stream buffer. So we'll hold the rest for the engineer. Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? Ron?
My question pertains to the garage addition on lot 39.01. Clearly, the construction has begun on the garage addition, but yet the whole house seems to be under construction. Is that something that we need to be concerned with? Is there different permits that needed to, I mean, you own the house, you can make your own improvements, but it doesn't seem to be before this board as far as the improvements to the dwelling itself. It looks more than just a garage addition. It's a whole house renovation.
Apparently, from what I understand, I think Mr. Warrior may have addressed this at the last meeting, that when they purchased, the property was in pretty bad shape. They have gone through your construction office. They have architectural plans, which actually I have right here. Not a small set. They're doing a substantial renovation of this property to bring it back into good condition. They've gone through your construction office, had all of their plans approved.
Okay, that's really all I was trying to get at, that it's been approved and it's not anything.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and also, Mr. M, I was about to say that I think the one reason that the garage is coming up is because the house is being constructed on the existing footprint. So, that's really probably just construction permits, building permits, but the garage addition did need zoning permits, and that's why that's what's going to have to go back to NJDEP.
Thank you for clarifying. Just wanted to make sure of that.
So just for my clarification, so technically, should the garage have been built before they got DEP approvals for this because they're within that buffer area?
Based on the information they had at the time, which, I think we'll hear more about from Ms. Floor, but they had an LOI, which they then submitted to the township, which indicated that they did not need another type of buffer. And so at the request of the HEC and this board, they returned to NJDEP, who said, oh, wait, I think we need more buffers here. So that's what the type of permit, what's it called? The
C1s.
No, the one where that you're the
permit by rule.
Permit by Rule 10. That's what they're talking about going back to NJDEP for, and that is separate than anything that would be built if this subdivision were to be approved and their driveway, et cetera.
So permit by rule, just for the board's edification, would you mind, engineer or planner, just kind of touching it? 'Cause I just want to make sure that just because you're not getting questions doesn't mean people may not fully understand what the differences are between the two. So if you could clarify, I'd appreciate that.
I will say that I don't know either, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it in testimony.
Ms. Floor would be happy to address the board on that as well.
Okay, so are we finished? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm not sure where this would be brought up, but at our last meeting, a member of the public who lives within 200-foot buffer of this property brought up an issue that they didn't object to the plan, except that they wanted to make sure that there would be some kind of a buffer between the back of their yard and the side of the rear lot. And I'm wondering, will that be part of a plan at some point?
They did say there was going to be landscaping along the,
Yes.
along those
It's
lots.
not shown, but it's.
It is
will
not
there
shown,
be
yeah.
Something at some point that will show that?
I think my understanding is that would be a condition of approval for either approval by the board's engineer or myself or someone representing the board's interest if the application were to be approved. Because the type of, the type of landscaping that could go there would maybe change based on what the grading turns out to be, what the stormwater needs are. So it more diligent to do it after the fact than before, as long as it was a condition of approval.
So we have to make it a condition of approval.
Yes.
It will be. It's
Okay.
part of one of the things Marty wrote
Okay.
down. And also, if you recall, they agreed to clean up the sled and stuff that's back there. Who knows, you can get money for the scrap metal maybe, but they did agree to all that, so that's good. Okay, no other questions? Okay. Ms. Floor?
Can you just swear me in again?
You're sworn in from the last
This
time.
is one.
So why don't you start with the mayor's question about whatever that is, permit by right?
Yeah, so I wanted to maybe walk you through all of that because I think it's confusing. So this applicant originally got a letter of interpretation, which has to do with wetlands. And that letter of interpretation established a 50-foot buffer. So this applicant had that letter of interpretation, had a surveyor, didn't have an engineer yet, had a surveyor lay out a minor subdivision, which is typical. And with the surveyor who laid out the minor subdivision, letter of interpretation, thought they had everything they needed, went to the construction office looked at it, it looked like they had everything they needed and issued them a permit. So I don't want anyone to think that they went and built a garage thinking that they weren't allowed to build a garage. There's a ditch on the property that happens to be Category 1. If you looked at it, most Category 1s have fish or water. It doesn't look like a Category 1, but it is a Category 1 stream. If you go to the DEP database, you can see it's a Category 1 stream. So it wasn't apparent, I don't think, to the construction office. It wasn't apparent to the applicant, but now it's apparent, and as a result of the Environmental Commission's letter, that it is a Category 1. And because it's a Category 1, it's a different set of regulations. So if you read closely the LOI, they always have caveats in there. And one of the caveats, if you read the fine print, is subject to any other Flood Hazard Area Control Act rules and regulations, right? It's like one of those small things. It's like that catch-all phrase at the end. So that was DEP's way of alerting if there's any other rules or regulations, you have to abide by them. So they have to abide by the Flood Hazard Area Control Act rules, which if it's a Category 1, it's a 300-foot buffer. So what we did after this last meeting is we went out there and looked at it, hoping maybe it was piped. It's not. It's an open ditch, so the 300-foot definitely applies. Surveyor went and looked and found his notes, went out there, did a second site visit, identified the top of bank. Took that top of bank, did 300 feet from that. The existing house and the garage fall within that, as well as the driveway. So at that point, we had to figure out whether it's, and this is where we'll walk you through different types of permits. Is it an individual permit? Is it a general permit? Is it a permit by certification? Or is it a permit by rule? So it appears to be a permit by rule. What that means is if it was the first one I mentioned, an individual permit or a general permit, you'd be applying to the DEP for permits, and you go through the long process, and there'd be all of the applications and submittals and fees. If it was a permit by certification, you'd also be filling out a certification. It's simpler. The easiest to meet is actually the permit by rule. The permit by rule says there are certain things that the DEP recognizes that are okay to do if you meet all of those conditions within a riparian zone, and there's certain things. So there's permit by rule 12, which talks about small additions to single-family homes. And so in this case, a garage, if the addition is less than 400 square feet, it has to be that small in order to meet that permit by rule 12. And then there's a bunch of conditions that I'm going to read to you. That's permit by rule 12. Then a driveway, there's a permit by rule 10 that says you can have a driveway disturbance, but there's a bunch of items under that condition that says, like, for example, if it was previously disturbed ground. So is this area have reeds and wetlands? Is it never been disturbed before? Or is it an area you mow, right? Is it an area that's been tilled in the past, such as the case in this where it used to almost be like farmland? So let me read through permit by rule 10 and 12, just so you understand what those conditions would have to be. And we did discuss it with Mr. Mealy today, and in addition to us two engineers, plus Bob Mullen, all putting our heads together and trying to make sure, does it meet that? We went line by line. They also ran it by their permitting specialist, who was her name's also Jackie, and she was in North Carolina, I believe, and she also went through it. So we had 4 people go through these permit by rules just to make sure that we were all comfortable. But in addition to that, in addition to the 4 of us looking at it, we've agreed as a condition, why don't we get an extra set of eyes, the DEP, do an applicability determination, which we're fine with, to make sure that everybody's comfortable that we meet those two permit by rules. And so that permit by rule, these are all under the Flood Hazard Area Control Act rules. Number one, applicant, the addition, this is for the construction of addition to a lawfully existing habitable building, is what it says. Condition one, the addition's not in a floodway. It's not. This is not in a floodway. The footprint doesn't exceed 400 square feet. So the whole garage is 800 square feet, but the addition portion, because there was an existing garage there before, is less than 400 square feet. So we meet that. And I think Mr. Mealy asked us to just prove that. We have architectural plans. We can submit those to Mr. Mealy in order to prove that. And that the lowest floor of the addition is constructed at least 1 foot above the flood hazard design flood elevation. It's not a flood zone, so we meet that. And then does not result in a substantial improvement to the building. Now that's building code words. Can't exceed more than 50%. Meet or exceed. So this also meets that. The enclosure of the lowest floor is not used for...
Jack, can I stop you for 1 second?
Sure.
On the garage, you said it is 800, but it's existing, even though it's in the buffer. You negate that and say you just can't add more than 400?
Correct.
So we already have an issue, and we're adding more to the issue, and that's okay.
Well, I don't know that it's an issue. The DEP identifies things that they feel are permit by rules that aren't an issue, and they feel that if you meet those, that it's actually not something that would require you to apply for a permit. So less than 400 feet, they consider, and I don't want to say not an issue, but they consider something that is a permit by rule. And so they've identified many things. Like, for example, you can go through, there's quite a bit of permit by rules, but there are exceptions that the DEP has identified to be acceptable things that you can do within a riparian buffer, but they don't just make a blanket statement. They give you, in this case, 7 items that 400 feet is okay if it's not in a flood zone, if it doesn't have the lowest floor, below the flood elevation. So in addition to it having to be less than 400 square feet, they've got 7 other things that it also has to meet in order for the DEP to say, okay, this meets the permit by rule. And so we went through all of those 7 things with your engineer, and to both of us, it appears we meet that permit by rule that DEP has established, and those 7 conditions under it to meet permit by rule number 12. And then we did the same thing with the driveway, which is permit by rule number 10. We went through, it says no fuel tanks, solar panels. There's a bunch of things that they say don't meet that permit by rule number 10. We're none of those things. No disturbance within 25 feet of a top bank unless it lies adjacent to a lawfully existing bulkhead, retaining wall, or revetment. On that one, we looked at the driveway. We realized we were 23 feet, that we might have to slide it 2 more feet in order to meet that. We believe we can do that. But all of these things, DEP is also going to put their eyes on, and if they look at it and say, from an applicability standpoint, we don't think you meet that permit by rule, then they'll make us go after a general permit. And so that, I guess, is the comfort level, is that DEP's eyes will be on it. If they feel we meet the permit by rule, then we won't have to go for a permit. If they don't, then they'll make us go for a general permit.
And that, if it was a GP, it would be after the fact because the construction has commenced.
Yeah, the truth is that it's already, any work that was going to happen is already there. It's really getting a permit for something that's already there. Short of ripping it down, it's already been built. So there's not going to be any additional disturbance, with the exception of taking that driveway that's in disrepair right now and cleaning it up and making it a straight 20-foot wide. Outside of that, everything that you see on that front lot that's within the riparian buffer has already occurred. And as I mentioned, the applicant sincerely didn't know. We were brought on after the fact. They sincerely didn't know. They went and they got a permit, and they thought that they were permitted to do so. I can also answer the stormwater questions if you'd like.
Does anybody have any questions on the riparian zone or any permit by rule questions? Okay, seeing none. Walk us through your stormwater ideas.
All right, so for the stormwater, when you do a minor subdivision or any type of project where you're proposing a house, you'll have to do a plot plan approval. That's typical. So we would do a grading plan, and in that, if there's stormwater, if you're increasing the impervious, the engineer always requires you to provide them a calculation, and if you're increasing, then they make you propose something to capture that runoff. We discussed it today. We believe it's in this case, we don't think we're going to trigger major development, but we do think that we're going to increase some of the impervious with the driveway, because the driveway is being made wider. And there's going to be an additional house in the back. So we will have to mitigate that. And one of the ways we can mitigate, there's multiple ways we can mitigate it. We'll look at pervious pavement, but we'll also probably have to put a dry well or something like that. And the applicant accepts that they're going to have to meet that as a condition of approval. That typically would always have been a condition of approval, because in a minor subdivision, you wouldn't have the exact dimensions and size of the house, but when you go in for that plot plan approval, we'll be using a real footprint. They'll make us put the corners on the house, they'll make sure everything works, and we'll have the actual footprint, which we use for the calculations, which get reviewed by your engineer.
And back to my comment, even though it may not be a major development and trigger more onerous stormwater mitigation from your perspective, given that it's a C1, and I don't mean to mix the fact that I understand the buffer requirements, I understand the permit by rule. However, it is still a C1, and I would kindly ask that the stormwater mitigation adhere to what is required for a major development.
As long as the applicant accepts that, we can do that.
Is that very onerous to go from a minor to a major?
Yes, some of the things. I mean, if the concern is quantity, then that's not as onerous. But if it's quality and you want us to try to treat or clean,
Total suspended solids.
yeah, total suspended things like that can get to be more on. For a single family or two houses would probably be a lot. A lot of those major development regulations envision removal of total suspended, a lot of things that you would see on a larger development. So if it's quantity the issue, that may be easier to meet.
I understand that, but earlier you mentioned you didn't know why this was a C1, because there's no trout in it. It's a C1 because it feeds the Swimming River Reservoir, which provides potable water to many residents, not just Holmdel residents. So total suspended solids is a concern.
Mr. Mealy, didn't we start out earlier when council said that he was going for the major subdivision classification, and then after you spoke, we went to the other classification? So weren't we originally going down that way? But you said it didn't meet it because of the coverage, didn't meet the minimum quarter acre disturbance area or usage? Am I?
It didn't meet it because of the slopes. Sorry, Mayor.
I think you summarized it quite well. Yes, the council had indicated that we're going to be designing this as though it were a major development, and I offered the fact that myself, my office, and Jackie Floor and her office had a conversation today about the amount of impervious coverage that's being proposed and the amount of disturbance that's being proposed may not be at or above the threshold where it would be, by definition, a major development. So by doing that, the ordinance and the 7:8 of the NJAC wouldn't necessarily trigger that requirement. If the board were so inclined to hold to a higher standard, it's at their discretion, but that's based on the conversations we had. We certainly would require, even if it were not a major, that they mitigate or, capture and recharge any runoff that's being generated by the new dwelling, the new driveway, and expansions, and maybe even the existing, if the board were inclined to hold a little higher standard for quantity. But, and that might involve tying in roof leaders and having some yard drains to capture some of that sheet flow off of the driveway, things of that nature. Once we start talking about a full-blown major development, it's a little more involved.
Thank you for that. I was just make sure that I understood it correctly. Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions with regard to stormwater? I don't know if there's some medium that we could come to. Certainly, we want to protect the stream, right? We want to protect the C1. But I don't know if there's some in-between way that, a full-blown, like you said, it's for, 5, 6, 8 houses that you want to, for one. I don't know if there's a way to do it. I don't know, Mr. Mealy, you were about to say something.
Thank you. I was only going to add, with regard to the testimony that was given regarding the permitting, that also there were some nuances there that they were going to provide, for instance, the original survey to show the original footprint of the dwelling, to show that the expansion's not over 400 square feet, also that the driveway is not going to be within 25 feet of the concrete culvert, things like that. So there was some additional information to be provided, but it's certainly within reason to expect that could be met. So just to capture that before we went too far. Regarding stormwater, perhaps they would want to take a 1-minute recess to discuss some of that. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think that, and again, we all of us understand that, DEP approved something, gave you an LOI, you moved ahead based on that information. But one of the things we've always kind of prided ourselves on here is that we do protect our waterways, and especially this particular one. So, maybe you want to take 30 seconds and talk to each other, or?
We'd be happy to.
Thank you, sir.
Short recess.
Is there some median that there is a median?
Yeah, are we off?
No.
Oh, but, I mean, technically, they would need to accommodate the increase.
I am starting that already, 8 o'clock. Joyce could tell.
I didn't eat dinner yet. Totally forgot.
Joyce, can you find another
I
seat?
do have lots of ravioli. There's lots of trade and fill.
I need to move.
There might be some people that are happy if you do this. It needs to move.
She might want to get a form.
Where do you stop?
He needs it. I'd like to know if he can spring all apart because of the farm. Don't go there.
I appreciate it, but
weird piece I've ever seen.
Where's she going?
Up past.
Oh, that's good.
He's supposed to be, this
Yeah, I
guy,
have to do it.
She's not flying to another state, to have her.
this guy flies to Italy and does, I can tell you, like.
Well, that I would have gone with her. Chicago.
Me too.
Take Jerry to Chicago.
So my son, in this case, the police system in the town, and when they get nodules, get locked up, can't move them. But even the thumb is getting in all the fingers, they move. It's looking like a pulley, when you move the, obviously, the ability, you pull, you move your thumb in and out. And you get like jammed in, and you kind of move, you can't move it.
It just reminded my friend had surgery today, but it's the exact same thing today. He just reminded me and texted him to see if he's okay. Yeah, my finger, he's got a trigger finger.
Yeah,
It was locked.
Yeah.
He was down the beach with me this weekend. I'm like, what is with your hand?
You get surgery today?
Today.
How'd it go?
I just texted him, I forgot. I just reminded him.
Nice prank.
Hopefully he can text.
Take him a couple days to get back to you.
We
saw you. They were like sharing wars going on out there. A week ago, something.
It's not specifically related to pregnancy,
Well, that's in that. Say that?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome back.
Chairperson Damaso, we've had some discussion, and we're in accord to go along with Mr. Castning's recommendations.
Thank you, we appreciate that. Our engineer was starting to say that there is some kind of median that you could do, and so, we're not going to, we understand the difference between two homes and, 8 and 10, but we do appreciate that you understand that we need to protect the C1 stream. So thank you for that.
So will the condition be to the discretion of the board engineer, so that it makes sense to the size and scale?
That's fine, yes.
You want that?
Well,
That's okay.
Either we hold to major development standard or we don't, or a percentage thereof.
So, all right, so why don't you tell us what you were going to tell us? Marty asked you to wait till they came back in. About, when I asked you about if there's a median.
Okay. I'll, if I may address the engineer.
Sure.
Okay. So the obligation by code is to meet to address the runoff that's being generated by the proposed development, the expansion, the additional driveway and footprint of the buildings, correct?
Correct.
If you were to address, say, not only the new buildings and the expansions and the proposed impervious, but also the existing, that would probably not meet all the criteria of a major development with the reductions for a 2, 10, and 100-year storm event, but that might be a happy medium?
We would agree with that. We had assumed we were going to do that regardless, so I think that makes sense. I think that there are some things especially in the new regs, that I think would cause even more disruption to the site, trying to build something large in order to, deal with some of the other requirements. So I think that we would agree to that.
Again, just be repeated for the record, just on the resolution, I just want to see what you're going
Is that
Yes.
Make sure Bill's okay.
I'm not sure, but in any event, you aren't exceeding the allowed impervious surface, correct?
Are we exceeding the allowed?
Yeah, for the site. You're not
No.
We're
going
not.
over a threshold?
No.
We're not.
Okay.
No, I think you said quite the opposite, right?
I'm sorry, we were...
The microphones. what percentage of impervious coverage do you, I thought you said it was much, it's not going over, correct? I thought you said it was less.
The amount of impervious coverage that they appear to be proposing is less than a quarter acre. I believe by rough calculation, they had estimated it to be about 6,300 square feet, and the threshold where it would be deemed major is 10,890, a quarter of an acre.
Significantly less.
I understand that, and regardless of the stormwater regs, we do have our own ordinance regarding impervious. So the question is, are they or are they not exceeding the amount of impervious on these both lots, given our ordinance?
You impervious on your ordinance is 15%, lot 39.01 is 11.5, and lot 39.02 is 8.7.
So the second one's half and the other one is under by 4%, so,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think that that's probably what you stated, and you'll restate it for Marty for the resolution, is probably an acceptable to us. And we appreciate that again, we need to make sure we protect the stream, so.
So
There are two components to protecting a stream. It's quantity and quality.
Right, and he's going to do both.
Yeah.
But he's going to do it at a percentage, so, right? That's what I understood. So would you say it again for everybody's edification?
So are you agreeing to doing the reductions?
Yes, we are.
So there's a couple parameters as indicated by the board members, and that there's the quality and the quantity. With regard to quantity, they are not only going to be addressing the additional impervious and the additional roof for the new home, but also the existing. So that's the additional quantity that they are going to be providing. So all of the impervious and roof area is going to be captured in some way or another, whether it by sheet flow or roof leader connections, things of that nature, to collect, convey, recharge on-site, not discharge downstream into the C1 or any adjoining lots. So quantity, by doing that, is above and beyond the standard. With regard to quality, they will also meet the criteria of those reductions that are typically required for a 210 and 100-year storm event. And hopefully they could meet those measures with a stormwater system that's going to collect and convey and recharge on site. And that's to be determined once they get the pencils out and figure it out. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you get it now? Are you?
I've always got.
No, I don't mean it that way. I mean, do you understand what he's saying, what they're going to do?
Yes.
I understand it. I mean, personally, I understand what we're trying to protect the stream, but I also don't want to kill the applicant in putting in this tremendous system. I'm trying to find a happy medium and be fair, but protect the environment at the same time. So thank you, Mr. Mealy.
My concern is the number of conditions for the approval, this one being one of them. And my preference would be that all these are addressed before a decision is made to approve or deny this application.
Okay.
That if they have to address everything and pay out engineering fees and pay out attorney fees and everything else to adjust the conditions that we might not approve, I don't think that's fair to the applicant.
How many I don't think there's all that many, I don't remember there being so many conditions. What is it?
So
We've approved applications with much less conditions than these, much more condition than
about
these.
6.
Okay,
There are 6 conditions.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've approved. So can you repeat them for us?
So we want to include that rear area in the conservation easement, which is also going to be marked and monumented. You're going to submit the plot plan drainage calculations. They're going to submit stormwater under the standard that Mr. Mealy just went over, calculations, so that can be approved. They're going to make landscaping of the rear lot for the neighboring property, as well as clean up at the time of submission of their permit for their house. It'll be a condition of this resolution, though. Obviously, they're going to submit to the DEP for their permit by rules, their permit by rule request for 10 and 12.
Marty, you just mentioned landscaping for the back lot. What about the front lot? Because there is a house on lot 40.12. Will there be landscaping along that? It's just one big long line.
Up to the board. That house is already existing, so they're not going to come in for another building permit for the front, but it's up to the board. You can do that. I thought we only talked about the rear lot because they have to come back, but
We did, and
That's the
I would,
board's discretion.
one would assume that they're going to try to make that lot match the other. I mean, I don't know if we have to make that a condition, but most of these conditions are ones that we are not, are typical conditions, except for the permit by rule, and most of them are very similar to ones we've done in the past, so. And 6 is sometimes nothing.
Well, to his point, won't the driveway size be disturbing the lot on the front house as well as the water containment system on the front house?
Well, the driveway is existing technically already. It's
And
just a
growing.
shambles. And it's just going to be, my understanding, paved now or delineated better, because if you've driven past there, it's there's a driveway. I've been back there myself in the ambulance. It's not anything you could drive on. It's going to be a major improvement not in the stormwater regulations major improvement, but in people major improvement.
it shows on the plans, too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would assume that when you do this other work, you're going to replace and fix and make it look nice.
You're going to have to.
Okay. Are the applicants going to live in either home?
They're living in the home that they're rebuilding now.
Okay, so they're going to want to live in a nice house, I think.
Anybody have any other questions?
For the engineer, for their engineer?
For the engineer or
For anybody at this point. There's no public present to ask questions of anyone. We did have the testimony, it would have been short. We did have the testimony last meeting from the neighbor that was happy to have a cleaned up backyard and just something looking nice instead of what they have. So other than that, we have no other public comment. If no one has any other questions, or if either of our professionals have anything to add.
So is there any more testimony from your side?
We have no further testimony to
Okay,
present.
okay.
I have no further questions. I just have a couple comments, kind of just for the board's edification, because the planner is, the applicant's planner is not here tonight, and technically, I think all of the testimony that needed to be put on the record was put on the record. The new, the new corridor, the new buffer doesn't technically require new waivers or variances, but I just kind of wanted to situate a couple of these things because, first of all, this is a major subdivision, which I think was alluded to earlier, but the reason this is, even though it's 2 lots, it's a major subdivision because of the environmental conditions on the site. At first, that was because of the steep slopes, but per the ordinance, the stream corridor also makes it rise to that level. So that's not necessarily something for the board to make a decision on, but it is why, they had to provide additional details in the first place. And I think what led us to, having a better understanding of this site in the long run, even though obviously it's been a long process. And then I know that we've been very focused on the environmental issues justifiably, but the variance that's required here really has to do with the lack of street frontage. And I mentioned this briefly, it was in my report, and I think I brought it up briefly at the last hearing, but there's also a variance from the MLUL, which is what, it's from sections 35 and 36, and it's called a planning variance. And I think, the testimony is really the same here because that has to do with whether or not the lot can abut a public street. And so it was the applicant's burden to show that, in addition to the positive and negative criteria associated with the C variance, they also had to show that, this was either a hardship or that the lot didn't have to be related to the street, and that also that it would had room for emergency vehicles. So I think, I just want to make sure that that's included in the resolution as well, if it were to be approved, because that is something that the MLUL does requires for the lot to abut a street. So that, yeah, that's just what I wanted to just clarify that, because we didn't have a planner here tonight, so I had to make myself heard. No, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has anything. So thank you.
So just clarify, you said this is not a hardship application, or it is a hardship? Just make sure I
No, that's
understood.
one of the things you had to.
So yeah.
So I just want to get...
So that was actually that's the MLUL language for the planning variance, which
Okay.
is from 3635, which is not something you see every day.
Okay.
In terms of, the typical C criteria, which is either that the applicant can either argue that it's a hardship affecting the specific piece of property, or that it advances the purposes of zoning and the benefits outweigh the detriments. The applicant's planner went with the C2 criteria and addressed it from that angle. So that was the testimony that was put on the record last time. So, we have to the board just should consider whether they believe that testimony met the standard, that the benefit outweighs the detriments.
So C2, the benefits have to outweigh the detriments of approving a lot that doesn't have the required frontage to a street, correct?
Yes, which is 0 where, I believe, however much is required. Forgot that part. Yes, so where the applicant's proposing 0 and 140 is what's required in the R40B zone, because it does not really, anticipate this type of either a flag lot or an easement lot.
Did you say the numbers one more time? 140 is required?
140 is the required lot frontage, and that's measured at the street line.
And what we're getting with this is?
The front lot does meet the requirements. I believe it's 300 feet, but the rear lot is technically 0.
0, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we have no further questions, or you have no further testimony?
We don't have further testimony to present.
And we have no further questions or comments from anyone? Okay, I need a motion to approve this application, subject to the conditions Marty outlined and the variance that they need. Okay.
Second.
Joyce moved. Zach will second. Were you raising your hand, or you second? Oh, you moved it? Okay, and then okay, Zach will move it and Joyce will second.
I never said.
I thought you said move.
I'll second.
Oh. I thought you said move. All right. That was you that said move? My apologies. Okay.
Mr. Ackerson,
Yes.
Mayor Von Turnhoff,
So, based on the criteria, and as not being a hardship, and being C2, and the frontage is a major issue. We did this for a reason. We require frontage for a reason. This cannot be approved, in my mind, without having the adequate frontage. We put these ordinances in place for a specific reason. The town also have concerns about the stormwater, the C1, on the property, in the front. So, absolutely no.
Dr. Gilstein,
Yes.
Mr. Cassidy,
No.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Ms. Plusas,
Yes.
Mr. Edna,
Yes.
Ms. Tomaso.
Yes.
Thank you all very much for sticking with us over 2 evenings of presentation and going through these difficult issues. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your ability to understand how important this C1 is for this town. Okay. That being said, Attorney, you have any report?
No.
Mr. Engineer, do you have any report?
No, I do not.
Ms. Planner, do you have any other reports?
I do not.
Okay. Bonnie, do we have anything scheduled for October, where are we? We are October 5th. October 19th? So we have nothing available on the agenda for October 19th? Okay, so would we like to cancel the meeting on October 19th due to lack of agenda? Okay, so. Something big coming in? Exciting. Okay. Thank you. So I need a motion to cancel the meeting on October 19th due to lack of agenda.
Motion.
Okay, pick a person. Everybody said yes.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We need a motion to adjourn as well, please.
Motion. Adjourn.
All right, pick two people. Jeff, Zach. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh,